building on South Broad Street looked exactly how I'd imagined it would. Historic marble columns rose toward ornate ceilings decorated with gold leaf that must have been installed over a century ago. Crystal chandeliers hung from every archway, catching the October evening light filtering through tall windows. People moved through the space dressed in designer suits and evening gowns that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. My borrowed suit jacket suddenly felt inadequate, the fabric not quite sitting right on my shoulders. Rebecca had been talking about this awards ceremony for weeks. Her company's biggest event of the year, she'd said multiple times. Everyone who mattered would be there. The entire executive team. Decision makers. People whose connections could determine the trajectory of careers. She'd spent an unusual amount of time getting ready tonight, changing outfits 3 times before settling on the new dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion. A black number that probably cost more than I wanted to know about. I'd been proud watching her prepare. 6 years of marriage, and she still took my breath away sometimes. But there'd been something different about her energy lately. A distraction I couldn't quite name. She'd attributed it to work stress, and I believed her because that's what you do when you trust someone. Now I watched her from across the ballroom as she laughed with a group of executives. Not her real laugh, the one I heard at home when something genuinely struck her as funny. This was the professional version, carefully calibrated for networking and making impressions. She looked beautiful under the chandelier light, and I felt that familiar mix of pride and distance that had become more common over the past several months. The bar was positioned near the grand staircase, and I waited patiently behind 3 other guests for 2 glasses of wine. The bartender worked efficiently, and I found myself watching Rebecca through the crowd as I waited. She'd been working late more often over the past few months, coming home after 9, sometimes after 10. Distracted when she finally walked through the door, already talking about tomorrow's meetings before she'd even taken off her coat. I'd chalked it up to her promotion 7 months ago. Director positions came with pressure and responsibility. I understood that. My job with the City Transit Authority kept regular hours, but I knew corporate life operated differently. The late nights, the weekend emails, the constant connectivity, it was all part of climbing that ladder she'd set her sights on. The bartender handed me 2 glasses of Pinot Grigio, Rebecca's preference, and I turned back toward the ballroom floor. That's when I saw him approaching her. Stephen Caldwell. I'd heard his name dozens of times over the past year, but had never met him in person. He was exactly as I'd pictured him from Rebecca's descriptions. Mid-40s, wearing an expensive tailored suit that probably cost $3,000, moving through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his professional life. He had that particular brand of corporate authority, the kind that came from years of board meetings and having assistants handle anything inconvenient. He stood too close to Rebecca. His hand rested on the small of her back, and I noticed she didn't step away. That registered somewhere in my mind, a detail I couldn't quite process yet. I started walking toward them, wine glasses in hand. Then his hand moved to her waist and pulled her closer. And I heard him say it, clear as anything despite being 25 feet away. Your husband looks lost over there. He's free to leave if he's not comfortable. You're here with me tonight. Tom didn't just slow down. It stopped. The chatter around me became white noise. The clinking glasses and ambient music faded to nothing. All I could focus on was Rebecca's face flushing red and the fact that she wasn't pulling away. She wasn't telling him to stop. She just stood there, frozen, while her boss publicly claimed ownership of her. The wine glasses felt impossibly heavy in my hands, weighted down by what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't some misunderstanding or poor judgment. This was deliberate. This was a man marking his territory in front of witnesses. I set the glasses down on the nearest table with careful precision. Then I started walking toward them. With each step, my vision sharpened. The conversations around me fell away as people sensed something building. Rebecca's eyes met mine, and I saw something that would haunt me later. Fear. Not fear of Stephen Caldwell and what he'd just said. Fear of me. By the time I reached them, a small circle had formed. Witnesses to whatever came next. Stephen still had his hand on my wife's waist, and he was still smirking. I heard you, I said calmly. You said I'm free to leave. Look, friend, he started, his tone patronizing. This is a professional event. Maybe grab another drink and let the adults handle business. I began removing my jacket. Slowly, deliberately. The fabric slid off my shoulders, and I held it in one hand. Around us, conversations were stopping. People were noticing. A woman in a blue dress actually gasped. Then I'm done pretending. Pretending what? The smirk was still there, but it had lost some of its confidence. His eyes flickered to the people watching us. Pretending I don't see what's happening. Pretending your hand on my wife is professional behavior. Pretending you didn't just dismiss me at your company event in front of 50 witnesses. I didn't strike him. Violence would have been too easy, too simple, and ultimately too forgettable. Instead, I stepped very close, invading the bubble of personal space he'd been so comfortable violating with my wife. My hand closed around his wrist, the one still resting possessively on Rebecca's waist, and I removed it with firm, controlled pressure. He tried to pull away, twisting slightly, but my grip held without effort. 6 years of electrical work, climbing poles and handling heavy equipment, builds a certain kind of practical strength. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. You're going to apologize to my wife for putting your hands on her without her permission. Then you're going to apologize to me for disrespecting my marriage in a room full of people. You need to let go right now, or, his voice had taken on a threatening edge, the corporate executive trying to reassert dominance. I twisted his wrist slightly, applying just enough pressure to hurt without causing actual injury. His knees buckled, and his carefully maintained composure cracked. His face went red, whether from pain or embarrassment I couldn't tell, and didn't care. The circle of witnesses had grown. 20 people, maybe more. I could see security guards pushing through the crowd. I'm waiting, I said. I apologize. His voice was strained. Louder. And specifically. I apologize for inappropriate behavior. I shouldn't have touched your wife. Or said what I said. I released my grip and stepped back. Then I put my jacket back on with the same deliberate calm. The security guards reached us just as I finished buttoning it. Sir, we need you to come with us, the lead guard said. Of course. I'm ready. But the guards were looking at Stephen too, uncertain about something. Multiple witnesses started speaking up at once. He didn't start it. The VP said his wife was with him. He was defending himself. The head of security, an older man who'd probably seen every kind of disturbance this building could offer, made a judgment call. Mr. Caldwell, I think you should come with us as well. Stephen sputtered something about calling the company president, but the guards were already escorting us both toward a service entrance. I didn't look back at Rebecca. Couldn't bear to see whatever expression she was wearing. They put us in separate offices off the main lobby. I could hear Stephen in the other room, angry and making phone calls. I sat calmly and waited for whatever came next. The police arrived within 30 minutes. They took statements from what seemed like half the ballroom. The venue manager spoke to me with something that felt like sympathy. By 9 o'clock, they let me go. No charges filed. The witnesses had been unanimous about who provoked the confrontation. They also banned me from the venue, which I accepted without protest. Some places aren't meant for people like me anyway. I sat on the front steps of our row house in Fishtown, waiting. Rebecca arrived in an Uber around 10:45. She looked exhausted, her makeup smudged, still wearing that new dress. I'd expected her to be upset, maybe crying, maybe ready to talk about what her boss had done. Instead, she looked irritated. The entire company is talking about what happened, she said. Good. They should talk about what your boss said to me. You embarrassed me in front of everyone I work with. My stomach dropped. I embarrassed you. You made a scene. You physically assaulted my supervisor. I removed his hand from your waist. Where exactly was it supposed to be? She sighed like I was being unreasonable. There are workplace dynamics you don't understand. That's when I asked the question that would change everything. How long? How long what? How long has he been touching you like that? The pause told me everything I needed to know. It's not what you think, she said. Then tell me what it is. Can we please go inside? The neighbors. No. Right here. How long? Nothing happened. He's my boss. There are certain expectations in corporate environments. Expectations that he can claim you in public? She looked away. It's complicated. He's been interested since my promotion. Your promotion was 7 months ago. Silence. And in that silence, I understood. The promotion she'd worked so hard for, the late nights, the distraction. All of it clicked into place like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too trusting to see. Did you sleep with him to get the promotion? I asked. I earned that position, she said defensively. That's not what I asked. I did what I needed to do to advance my career. I stood up and walked toward the front door. I need you to leave. Go to a hotel. Anywhere but here. This is my house too. And tomorrow I'm calling a lawyer. Tonight, I just need you gone. She stood there for another moment, then turned without a word and pulled out her phone to call an Uber. I watched her wait on the sidewalk until the car arrived, then went inside and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rebecca's face when Stephen touched her. The way she didn't resist. The way she looked frightened of me instead of him. Around 3 a.m, I gave up trying and found myself standing in our home office, staring at her laptop sitting innocently on the desk. I knew it was probably wrong. Knew it violated some boundary of privacy and trust. But those concepts felt hollow now. The truth mattered more than propriety, and I needed to understand what I was really dealing with. Her passwords had always followed predictable patterns. Our wedding date was June 15th. She used variations of her nickname, Beck. Combinations of numbers that meant something to us. On the first try, I entered the wedding date with her name. Wrong. Second try, I reversed the order. Still wrong. Third try, I used the format she preferred for her work accounts, 0615 Beck, with an exclamation point. The laptop opened. Her email account was easier. The password manager remembered it. And what I found in those first few minutes made my hands shake so badly, I had to set down the coffee I'd been drinking. The first email was from 8 months ago, dated in February, back before her promotion had even been announced. A thank you note to Stephen for dinner the previous evening, mentioning how much she appreciated him considering her for the director position. Professional enough on the surface, polite and appropriately distant. But she'd never told me about any dinner. Never mentioned meeting Stephen outside of office hours. Then I found one from a week later. Stephen writing that last night had been a mistake, that they should keep things professional going forward. My stomach turned. Something had happened between them. Something significant enough that he felt the need to walk it back. But the email that cut deepest was from 7 months ago, dated just a week before her promotion was officially announced to the company. Rebecca writing to him in careful, calculated language. I'm not asking for special treatment. But if you meant what you said about my potential, the director role would let me prove it. And we can keep what happened between us. My husband doesn't need to know about any late dinners. She'd initiated it. Not just continued something he'd started, but actively pursued it. Used it. Leveraged it for her career advancement. I kept reading, unable to stop even though each email felt like a physical blow. There were messages from 6 months ago about planning strategy sessions at his cabin in the Poconos. Hotel reservations in Wilmington, just 40 minutes away, close enough for a lunch meeting that stretched into evening. Restaurant charges on our joint credit card for places I'd never heard of. On nights, she'd told me she was working late on client presentations. Then I found the one that made my blood run cold. Dated 4 months ago, written in a casual tone that suggested this had become routine. Rebecca writing. Connor asked why I'm home so late again. I told him we had a client presentation that ran over. He believes everything I tell him. Sometimes I think it's almost too easy. They'd been mocking me, laughing about the naive husband who trusted his wife. I was a joke to them, an inconvenience, an obstacle easily managed with simple lies. I found another email from 2 weeks ago. Stephen writing about his promotion to SVP next quarter, how they'd have more flexibility after that. Your husband's situation is temporary. Once you're senior director and I'm SVP, we can handle transitions more cleanly. Husband's situation. That's what I was. A situation to be handled. I printed everything. 47 pages of emails, hotel receipts, credit card statements showing restaurant charges on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Then I drove to my sister Michelle's house in Manayunk. It was just after 7 a.m. when I knocked on her door. She answered in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and let me in without questions. Her husband made coffee while I spread the printed pages across their dining room table. Michelle read through them slowly, her expression changing from confusion to shock to something like grief. I always thought she was good for you, she said quietly. So did I? What are you going to do? End it. All of it. Her career too? She made choices. I'm just making sure there are consequences. Michelle offered their spare bedroom, and I accepted. My phone started buzzing around 11 in the morning. 12 calls from Rebecca by evening. Text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. At 9 that night, I finally responded. Lawyer's office. Monday, 9 a.m. Come alone. The law office was on Walnut Street in Center City, on the third floor of a building that looked like it had been standing since before I was born. Patricia Reynolds's name was etched on a brass plate beside the door. Her reviews online had suggested she didn't waste time on sentiment or false hope, which was exactly what I needed. I arrived 15 minutes early with my folder of evidence, the pages organized chronologically and labeled with sticky tabs for easy reference. Rebecca showed up 10 minutes late, which somehow didn't surprise me. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual professional attire. Patricia's office was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood furniture, law books lining the walls, framed diplomas from schools I'd heard of but never attended. She was in her 50s, gray hair cut short and professional, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents. She spent 20 minutes working through the evidence I'd brought while Rebecca and I sat in uncomfortable leather chairs on opposite sides of her desk. The silence felt suffocating. I could hear Rebecca breathing, could sense her looking at me, but I kept my eyes on Patricia. Finally, the lawyer looked up and removed her glasses. This is comprehensive documentation of adultery and systematic deception, she said, her tone clinical and matter-of-fact. In Pennsylvania, we have fault-based divorce options. Adultery qualifies as grounds for at-fault divorce, which affects how the court views certain aspects of asset division and spousal support. Those are private communications, Rebecca said, her voice defensive and thin. You went through my personal email. Between you and your boss, Patricia responded without sympathy, discussing your husband as a situation to handle. Privacy doesn't protect conspiracy or planning. And Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state for accessing marital property, which includes computers in the marital home. I want her to face every consequence, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Legal, professional, social. All of it. Patricia nodded like she'd expected this. Divorce will be straightforward with this level of evidence. But you mentioned something on the phone about workplace consequences? Her company has policies, I said. I researched them. Supervisor-subordinate relationships are explicitly prohibited. You can't do this, Rebecca said, panic creeping into her voice now. The corporate composure she'd maintained for years was cracking. Connor, please. It will destroy my career. Everything I've worked for. You did this, I said, finally looking at her directly. Not me. You made these choices. You sent these emails. You mocked me to your boss. I'm just documenting what you did. She tried appealing directly to me, her eyes wet with tears that might have moved me a week ago. 7 years together. 6 years of marriage. That has to mean something. It meant something until 7 months ago when you decided sleeping with your boss mattered more than our marriage. Patricia laid out the plan with the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. File a fault-based divorce petition citing adultery with documented evidence. Submit all emails, receipts, and communications to court records, which would become public documents. Simultaneously file an ethics complaint with Rebecca's company, including the timeline that clearly showed her promotion corresponded with the beginning of her sexual relationship with her supervisor. I'll lose everything, Rebecca whispered, her hands shaking in her lap. My job, my reputation, everything. Good, I said. Maybe the next man will know what kind of person you are before he makes the mistake of trusting you. Patricia asked if I was certain, her eyes serious behind her glasses. This path is nuclear, Mr. Walsh. Once we file these complaints, there's no going back. No reconciliation. No negotiating a gentler settlement. I didn't hesitate. Completely certain. That afternoon, I sat at Michelle's dining room table with my laptop and wrote the ethics complaint using the template Patricia had provided. I spent 2 hours getting the language exactly right, making sure every detail was accurate and verifiable. I included the complete timeline of the relationship, the dinner in February, the hotel stays, the cabin weekends, the emails discussing me as an obstacle to their plans. I attached every piece of evidence. Hotel receipts showing charges to Rebecca's credit card, restaurant bills from establishments I'd never heard of, email exchanges where they discussed meeting times and expressed frustration about having to be discreet, text message screenshots from the cloud backup where Rebecca complained about having to maintain appearances at home. The company's own policy was clear, and I quoted it directly in my complaint. Romantic or sexual relationships between supervisors and subordinates are strictly prohibited and constitute grounds for immediate termination. Such relationships create conflicts of interest, abuse of power dynamics, and expose the company to significant legal liability. I submitted the complaint through their anonymous ethics portal at precisely 2:14 in the afternoon. The submission process took less than 5 minutes. Within seconds of clicking the final button, I received an automated response with a case number, PHI 2024-847. The message informed me that an investigation would commence within 48 hours and that all information would be kept confidential to the extent possible under law. Rebecca showed up at Michelle's house that evening. Michelle let her in after I nodded approval. Rebecca looked desperate in a way I'd never seen before. They called me into HR. Someone filed a complaint. I did, I said. You're destroying my life. No, you destroyed our marriage. I'm just making sure you don't walk away without consequences. She tried every defense she could think of. It was her word against his. We could work through this. She'd quit her job. She never actually loved him. I showed her the printed emails where she'd mocked me, called me naive, laughed about how easy it was to lie to me. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing. There's nothing you have that I want anymore. I could fight you. Make this ugly. It's already ugly. You made it ugly 7 months ago. The next few days moved quickly. Tuesday morning, the company's HR department called me for a formal interview. I met with 2 representatives and their attorney, providing the complete evidence package. They reviewed security footage from the awards ceremony, which clearly showed Stephen's behavior. Wednesday, they interviewed Rebecca for 3 hours. Then Stephen. Then multiple witnesses from the ceremony. The company attorney concluded there were clear policy violations and potential liability issues. Wednesday evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Stephen Caldwell's voice came through, strained and desperate. He must have gotten my number from Rebecca. We need to talk. Man to man. We have nothing to discuss. Look, I know you're angry, but this affects a lot of people. My wife, my kids. Your wife's career. You should have thought about your wife and kids before you put your hands on mine. I can make this worth your while. Financially, you think this is about money? Everything's about money. Name your price. There isn't one. You humiliated me in public. You corrupted my marriage. Now you face the consequences. He started to lose his composure, but I hung up before he could finish. He called back twice. I blocked the number. Thursday morning at 9, they called Stephen into a meeting with the HR director and company president. By 10:30, security was escorting him from the building. Termination for cause. Gross violation of ethics policy, abuse of supervisory position, creating a hostile work environment. No severance package. Thursday afternoon, they fired Rebecca too. Willing participant in policy violations, failure to report an inappropriate relationship, providing false information on internal documents. She called me sobbing. They fired me. I have nothing now. You have exactly what you chose, I said, and ended the call. Patricia filed the divorce petition the following Monday. Rebecca was served papers at her sister's house, where she'd been staying. Her attorney tried to negotiate, but I refused every settlement offer. The hearing was scheduled for 8 weeks out. Rebecca tried everything during those 8 weeks. She showed up at my work site at the transit maintenance yard. My coworkers saw her, and the situation became awkward until I asked her to leave or I'd call security. I'll do anything, she said. Marriage counseling. Church. Whatever you want. I want you to live with the consequences of your choices. By the 4th week, her attorney filed a motion for temporary spousal support, claiming she couldn't find employment due to false allegations. Patricia responded with the evidence package. The judge reviewed it and denied the motion within days. Employment termination resulted from documented policy violations, not false allegations. I heard through friends that Rebecca was working retail at King of Prussia Mall, making $16 an hour instead of her $95,000 salary. Her car had been repossessed. She'd moved to a cheaper apartment. The court hearing happened 2 months after that night at the awards ceremony. We met at family court in City Hall. The judge had clearly reviewed everything thoroughly beforehand. The hearing itself lasted 45 minutes as both attorneys presented their cases and the judge asked clarifying questions. His ruling was clinical. This court finds clear, and convincing evidence of adultery over a sustained period. The respondents' own communications demonstrate premeditation, deception, and continued infidelity despite multiple opportunities to cease the behavior. The request for spousal support is denied. Marital assets shall be divided according to standard Pennsylvania law. The divorce is granted with fault assigned to the respondent. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca tried one final time. "I'm sorry. I really am sorry." "You're sorry you got caught," I said. "You're sorry there are consequences, but you're not sorry you did it. If you were sorry you did it, you would have stopped after the first time." "Where do I go from here?" "That's not my problem anymore." Through workplace connections, I learned what happened to Stephen. His wife filed for divorce immediately and won primary custody of their children. His reputation in Philadelphia's pharmaceutical industry was destroyed. I saw his LinkedIn profile once. He'd removed the VP title. Rumor was he'd taken a position at some small biotech startup in New Jersey for a fraction of his previous salary. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I really felt like myself again. It had been 8 months since that October night at the awards ceremony, but only half a year since the court made everything official in December. I was living in a small apartment in Fishtown, just 2 blocks from the row house Rebecca and I had shared. We'd sold it as part of the divorce settlement, split the proceeds 50-50 as the law required. My share was $47,000, most of which went to legal fees and starting over. The new place was smaller, simpler, but it was mine. I'd settled into a routine: work, gym, occasional dinners at Michelle's house. I'd even started dating casually. Nothing serious, just coffee with someone a friend had introduced me to. Taking things slow felt right. One Saturday afternoon, I was at Reading Terminal Market picking up lunch when I saw her. Rebecca, working the register at one of the Amish bakery stands. She looked older somehow. Tired. Her hair was different. When she noticed me, her face went pale. I nodded politely and moved on. Didn't feel satisfaction or pity. Didn't feel anything at all, really. That evening, Michelle asked if seeing her had been difficult. "No," I said honestly. "It was just seeing a stranger who used to be someone I knew." A week later, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Thank you." The sender was Amy Caldwell, Stephen's wife. Her message was brief. She thanked me for bringing the truth to light. She'd suspected something for over a year, but had no proof. Now she had full custody and a fair divorce settlement. Her children were doing better without the toxic presence. She ended with, "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you differently." I didn't respond, but I saved the email. It felt like validation that the consequences had reached beyond just my own marriage. 8 months after that night at the Union League, I found myself on my apartment balcony on a Sunday morning in June, coffee in hand, thinking about everything that had happened. The awards ceremony felt like it had occurred in another lifetime. The person who'd walked into that building, trusting and naive, felt like someone else entirely. That evening, I went to Michelle's house for dinner. Her husband asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you ever wonder if you overreacted?" "No," I said. "I reacted exactly right for who I am." Michelle looked at me across the table. "Any regrets?" "I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. I regret being blind to the signs for so long. But I don't regret making sure actions have consequences." Their 10-year-old son asked what we were talking about, and I thought carefully before answering. Sometimes adults forget that how you treat people matters. I was reminding someone of that. Driving home through the Philadelphia streets, I passed the Union League building, the place where everything had changed. I didn't feel anger or pain when I looked at it, just a clear memory of who I'd been and who I'd become. The man who walked into that building 8 months ago wouldn't have walked out. He would have made excuses, convinced himself to wait and see, maybe even blamed himself for not being enough. The man I am now wouldn't have walked in at all, because he knows his worth and doesn't need expensive venues to prove it. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what actually matters. Respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you command. And sometimes commanding it means showing people that crossing certain lines comes at a price they're not prepared to pay. I parked outside my apartment and looked up at my small windows. Simple life. Honest life.